chiming in about what this word means, and it was quite the intensive process. So ultimately, I was glad I was more working on the proposal than the actual module. I worked on both of them, but the proposal was really my baby.
So my question was, how do you navigate all those different personalities within your relationships?
Well, speaking as a sailor, I got in a sailboat and crashed into the beach, and then took a class on how to sail. True. I mean, that's just how I learn. I learn that way. But how do you navigate it? Honesty, talking about your feelings. That's the one thing that I learned as a man that was taught. Always stuff your feelings down. Stuff your feelings down. To actually. I'm jealous. People think that poly is not jealous, that somehow we've got a genetic mutation of jealousy, but that's not true. I'm probably one of the most jealous people you'll ever meet, but when I say it, and I lay it on the table, it's like tonight I was eating pizza, having pizza, and I was not having a good day, and I just said it. I'm not having a good day, and it's like the sun came out a little bit. It was a bit, So navigating relationships, any relationships, to me, what's the difference between, lovers and friends and family that you have a relationship with? Talk about it, or stuff it down for another day, and you know what happens when that other day comes. You shoulda, we coulda, all this, you can have a tally on a chalkboard about all the things you owe the other person if you don't talk about it at the moment that it happens. And sometimes the answer is, I don't want to talk about it now. And then then you say, well, we'll talk about it when you're ready. But it's got to be talked about, the feelings, and there's no judgment. You get out of people what you reward. If you want people to tell you what you want to hear, and you only reward that, then you got a bunch of friends and family that are telling you what you want to hear, and they're lying to you. So you reward honesty even if you don't like the honesty, and that's kind of how I put my sail up, catch the wind.
Does anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah. Part of it is the rules. There's another hot button issue in the poly community. So when my wife and I were new to open relating, one of our rules was a prohibition against having shiny new toy syndrome. The allegory is that, on Christmas, the kid who has 100 toys already in their toy box gets this one new toy, and it's like the only thing that exists in the world for them for a week until they get tired of it. And that's kind of how we are with new relationships sometimes. Because, it's a natural biological process to become consumed with a person once you finally realize, I like you. And that often doesn't work very well for the person you've been with for years, who's looking at you like, okay, so where do I come in? So a lot of couples have this rule against, no matter what you feel for this other person, you can't make me feel like I'm not the most important person in your life. So figure that out. So that evolves. I think that most polyamorous couples over time, if they are successful at being poly, they eventually lose the need for the rules as they gradually grow out of their insecurities. Once you really truly believe in your heart that your long-term partner is not going to leave you for someone else, then it becomes less necessary to restrict them in terms of their time or energy or love shown forward with another person.
And I would add to that there's a bit of a misnomer in the term poly. Like, it's not poly and fun and Pollyanna all the time, And I think even the question makes me think that, we're supposed to be perfect at it. But part of, for me anyways, the fire of it is the trial and error and trying to figure out how to love better, how to be loved better, how to ask for love better, And so I love that, we're able to say that doesn't mean that you're not jealous. It just means that, that's part of the edge play that I'm playing right now, figuring out, okay, I'm going to be jealous when I'm just with one person. So it doesn't make me more or less jealous because I'm with other people, and that then means it's my job to work on my jealousy. And that's a gift to me. I think that because it's up front in our face when you're in an alternative relationship, then we deal with it. But for those of us who get to hide from it, we never do. And it's always running in the background. It's always there.
Anybody else want to add?
Can you repeat the question?
How do you navigate your relationships? And you can also think about like time too, like, you know, does this person get the weekends and this person get the weekdays, or, you know, how do you navigate that as well?
What I've found is that people will kind of set the tempo for me or for us, because I don't actually have to set the tempo for them. I don't have to say, okay, you get Saturdays. It's just kind of like whenever we can fit each other in. And I'm a big believer in people will show you exactly where they need to be in your life. So if you are someone who requires more priority, you will show up as a person who requires more priority. Or if you're someone who likes to play the background, it makes it easier. I find that things fall naturally into place, or at least they have in my life. Sometimes it's a bit of a challenge, you know, if you do have someone who wants a lot of time. And that hasn't happened to me a lot, but when it did, I guess you'd have to ask him how he felt about that. But it was difficult, but I kind of felt like I wanted to give this person that, because, I mean, I'm pretty much, most all my time is going to be at home, you know, with my family and with the children. So the new person, I really, okay, you need a little bit more love. And you kind of give them that until you can't, or until they don't require it.
Yeah, I'm a victim of the shiny toy. I confess. It's something that I had to kind of get used to. It was totally different for me, because it was like, you know, at one point, like he was saying, like, you know, at one point I was getting, you know, the attention like I normally would in our relationship. We've been together for a while. So, you know, when I felt like she was giving that same type of attention to this person, I'm like, okay, well, what about me? What's going on? You know? But then I had to realize that this is a shared relationship. So I was able to take that and say, okay, well, you know, someone else can receive what I've gotten as well from this relationship. So I just kind of got over it. So it's like a jealousy thing, and then poof, it just kind of went away, because I'm able to do the same thing. I'm able to share my friendship, my love with other people as well in any capacity, and my wife is okay with that. So why shouldn't I be?
In my experience and the research that I've done on Black sexualities, it usually seems like polyamory also fits in with another alternative lifestyle, such as kink or being a swinger. I was wondering if any of you could speak to that, if you are also poly and something else. I know you said you are part of the kink lifestyle community, so maybe if any of you are part of any other communities as well, maybe you could speak to that. Anybody? Yes.
I'll never tell.
Plans
for the next election?
We started out in the swing community because we didn't know anything really. We weren't introduced to anything else. It was like, I did my research online and swingers was what came up. And I'd been aware of polyamory more or less. It was more polygamy is what I was more acquainted with growing up. And then I had seen some polyamory. I just, you know, I was not inundated, or I really didn't have any information. So we started out in the swing community and trying to navigate those waters. And We don't necessarily, our self fell down. We just are not swingers. However, I think it's a fun activity. I think if you want to do it, absolutely go to a party and meet some people, take some people with you. It doesn't even have to be like a random thing. It could be, you take your boyfriend or you take your girlfriend and you go and have a good time. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the anonymous thing that we automatically assume swinging is. So it's the same thing as polyamory. You just kind of mold it into whatever you want it to be.
I do find it interesting. I have gone to some of the clubs in town and scared to death. Different kinds of things going on there, and it really opened my eyes to to how beautiful relationships are and different. Because you've got people doing stuff, putting on these sessions, what do they call them, putting on these scenes, yes, and it was beautiful. I mean, husband and wives, and doing things that made them feel connected, and I feel connected. If somebody asked me what spirituality is, I think it has to do with my soul, who I am as a person. Some people say spirituality is feeling connected to the rest of the world, and I've never saw it that way because I always felt connected. So I don't need the things that some people need to feel connected. You go through traumas when you're young, and you build walls, and so to watch these things, and it's never threatening. The people are very nice out in these clubs. They're very, they have to be. After the scene, they're very nice. During the scene, it looks like they're not very nice. But so I learned. I really enjoy going out there and seeing what other people are doing, and exploring my own sexuality is really what I'm doing. You grow up in this world, and if you have, if you're something different about you than what's normal, you can get convinced that you're bad. You can get convinced that you are, something is wrong with you. I got married twice to try to knock this poly thing out of me. I really did. I thought, maybe just the right woman will keep me focused. But so when the last time I got divorced a couple years ago, I said I've got to really explore my sexuality. I've got to explore who I am and the nature of my soul. It's funny to hear an atheist talk about souls.
Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think I shared earlier that I do belong to the leather lifestyle and the kink BDSM communities. And I was thinking about, how we define poly. I know that in some circles you can have play partners, and that would not be considered having poly partners. So, it's interesting too, because in some circles, if your primary relationship is a vanilla relationship, then that's a relationship, and then the other stuff is, kind of the tertiary and the secondary stuff, or the secondary and tertiary stuff. So I have been defining that part of my sexuality for myself. What does that mean? Because the world would tell me that it's not okay to have a primary relationship and a secondary relationship, let alone have a primary relationship that is not a vanilla relationship. I'm a queer identified woman, so any relationship that I'm going to be in is going to be alternative. And what I love about what poly means to me is getting a chance to create what works and figure out what works and what doesn't work. That to me is the power and the empowerment piece of it. And I almost feel like it's the gift of all the movements that we've had before us, or in front of us, and that we've had in terms of what my mother experienced in her marriages, and my ancestors and all those things. So I was sitting here thinking about that and realized that why would I do the same things that have been done before just to say that I'm doing those things? Because as we know, the divorce rate is really high. It's still as high as it was the first time I heard the quote, 1 in 2 marriages. So the numbers aren't changing. And that's why, I don't get into the political aspect of things, but I find it really a joke to think about the sanctity of marriage and keeping it, it's like doing the same thing that we've been doing and then saying that it's going to become more sacred and it's going to get better. That doesn't work, so why not do something different? I think part of what's the challenge is because it's so different and we're creating it as we go, we don't have a lot of models. So it's one thing to say, my life either looks like the Huxtables or it doesn't. But I don't have any Polly Huxtables to look at and say, this is how they solve their problem in 27 minutes and 5 commercials. And so I think that's where we get really stuck because we're still very socialized by the school of life. Even if you grew up in an alternative family, when you walk out your door, you're still going to school. You're still watching TV at home that shows a nucleus family that looks a certain way. So I find that there's some sense of empowerment in it, but there's also maybe a disenfranchisement of, I don't see what's out there that reflects what's in here. And so as I stumble and I continue to try and do it, then the messages are, there must be something wrong with me because I can't keep one relationship for 50 years, right? And yet, I don't think that that's the brass ring. I don't think that's what we should be striving for. I have learned in the numerous relationships that I've been in that I get better each time. Not so much better maybe for relationships, because I'm not even sure I'm good at relationshiping anymore, but I do know that I'm getting better for me. And I love me more each time. And I know someone mentioned about this shiny toy syndrome. I actually like that experience. Because it gives me the opportunity to remember that if I'm getting hot and bothered over this new person over here, then I can use that energy for this relationship over here. And I think a lot of times we forget to do that. We keep all the energy over here with the new relationship, and we don't bring it over here. But our brains are different. When you're in a new relationship, all these synapses are going off, you got the happy hormones, the dopamine, everything's going off. So it is a shiny new toy, and it's very exciting. And that other person sometimes can be hurt by that. Real love tells us that these two things are different, and so we have to figure out how to move this energy and keep the flow going. So, I don't know.
I would watch that TV show. The Polyamorous. CBS.
Pitch it. So I have a question about sort of religion, spirituality. I know, Dan, we've talked about it before, but how, being in the South, being the Bible Belt, do you know anyone, or are you, a Christian who is navigating polyamory, or if you can, inform us of anything like that going on? Religion, polyamory, is it Christianity, polyamory, is it?
Well, we're considered Muslim. I don't know anybody else that is Muslim and doing this. If they are, they're not speaking up at all. This brother right here walking around with 6 wives and everything like that. I mean, to me, that's polyamory to me. But with that being said, I mean, that doesn't change my outlook on God or spirituality or whatsoever. I mean, I would still school my children on. First of all, when I was growing up, I was Christian and converted to Islam anyway. But whatever my children choose is fine with me. I would prefer for them to be Muslim, but it's fine with me. I have no preference as long as you believe in something other than a chair or rock or another person.
Or just believe in chairs and rocks and
trees
and stuff too.
No believing in chairs or rocks.
Yeah. Never sit on a chair nor a rock. Sacrilege.
But that is okay.
But growing up, I grew up born and raised Muslim, and I think that me being who I am, my parents probably would never own up to it. But basically, the way they raised me is exactly the way I am now. They raised me to have my own mind. Ding, 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 I'm using it. However, I don't know if they expected that.
That's the risk you take.
What are you going to do? So, I was always raised to believe that Islam was a common sense religion. So therefore I use my common sense. And if certain things that I have been taught over the years don't feel good and do not resonate within my common sense, and that means we're going to set that aside, and if it never makes sense, then it will stay aside. And I don't have, there are certain things that growing up we were taught to believe, and I just don't believe it anymore. I don't believe that one of the things that my mom always said was, Satan will come and he'll whisper in your ear and tell you bad things to do, right? And I'm like, I just cannot pass that on to my children. I can't do it. And that's just one of the many hurdles. So I whereas I identify with Islam, I feel like I identify with everything simply because of who I am, because I won't discard anything. And pretty much if anybody walking down the street were to come up to me and ask me and like, well, where's your head wrap? Why aren't you covered up? Well, my common sense tells me that I'm not going to go to hell if I decide to not do these things. And my common sense tells me that if I'm not going to hell if I decide that I'm going to honor who I am and love whoever I decide to love. And that goes, whereas I am heterosexual, if I wasn't, I would still have the same belief system, even though I'm raised out, because it's common sense tells me that God is not going to say, well, because you feel this kind of way, and yeah, I did make you that way, but you're going to go to hell because you couldn't hold it off and keep yourself, you couldn't be chaste and pretend like that part of you didn't exist. So I don't believe that, and that goes with the polyamory as well, because I poly-identify, if you will. That's who I am. It's not an activity. It is, if I decided to be monogamous tomorrow, it would have to end at some point, because I am not a monogamous person. Never have been. And even Islam leans to, men being able to be poly. Everything leads to that. Right. They can be poly. However, women are not allowed to have the same feelings, which common sense tells me that to be yes.
Anybody else want to talk about religion?
My academic training is as a philosopher and a historian of religion. I have a lot of thoughts about the subject. I really think that, in general, outside of being poly, generally growing up as a religious person in Western culture promotes this term I like to use, cognitive dissonance. Basically, you have to separate yourself between your pious self and your real self. Meaning, it's a sin in all these religions for you to have sex before marriage. But our culture tells us you're supposed to have sex before marriage. If you don't lose your virginity by pride, there's something wrong with you. So it's a bigger issue than just can you be poly and Christian or poly and Muslim. The real issue is that these religions don't fit very well in 21st century society. They're archaic, and they, especially Christianity, are dying slow deaths, natural deaths, because people eventually decide that their common sense tells them that this doesn't work for me anymore. So it starts with, only going to church once a month, and then it becomes only going to church Christmas, Mother's Day, and Easter, and then it becomes I'm just through with that. This happens more and more with each passing generation. One of my favorite philosophers is a guy named Bishop Shelby Spong, who is huge on the idea of reworking Christianity in a way that is more fitting for modern people. And so you don't have to throw away Jesus in order to, be your authentic self. So I think that if these religions are to really survive going into the future, more of that has to happen.
it go down? You okay, baby?
Do you want water?
I'm okay.
We're like,
Hey, honey. Squeeze you from behind. With consent.
Another point, for me personally, polyamory is a very fundamental part of my spirituality. My spirituality is pretty much an African tradition with a heavy dose of philosophy. So my core is a belief that I am God having a human experience. And I'm fond of the Christian term that God is love. So if I am God and I am love, then by definition, I cannot be limited and my love cannot be limited. I don't fit into boxes very well. And I think that really speaks to why the divorce rate is so high. Because as people more and more break away from just doing what they're told to do because they're told to do it and start to try to be authentic, they realize that when I come into this relationship with this person who likes me for me, and then after we've been together for a few months, they decide that this other part of me they don't like so much, so I have to shut that down. I have to compromise in order to make this relationship work. And you do that for 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, and eventually you start to resent the hell out of that person for making you change. And relationships dissolve. So for me, it is really a reaction to reality that I would not restrict myself and change myself in order to make you happy. Either like me for who I am or don't.
Does anybody from the crowd have any questions they would like to ask? Yes?
Hi. I have a question about finances. So how do you, especially for the married people, how do you negotiate finances in your relationships, and especially like within your primary or secondary, do you budget for that? Do you guys, the married folks, do you have finances combined and then budget that? How do you work out the financial piece?
It's tough. I mean, just like anything else, it's tough to do. I personally have a belief that if I have, then you have. And I've been in relationships with partners who don't believe that. So it makes it difficult. And I also believe in the value of equity, not just equalness. That a lot of times I have access to things that might have financial value to them, but I don't put dollars down to it. And then I have partners who have money and I don't. And so sometimes we work that out, that, you know, I can get us into this event for free. You have to pay, you know, the airplane ticket or whatever. But it's the same thing in having conversations. I have been in relationships though where I worked more than people did, and like even my first relationship, I was a little bit older than her, and so while she was going to grad school, I was working. She had a primary partner, and they had children in the home, and so one of the conversations was, you know, we split our resources, and time is a resource. So when you allow your partner to watch the kids, then that allows the other partner to go out and work, which means there's more money in the unit, so then she can pay for dinner for me, you know. So, and that was my first relationship, so I feel like I learned a lot there and helped me to bring that forward in other places. I've also been in relationships where I've worked more than the other person, and I resented the fact that they assumed that I would be paying for everything. Being in the lifestyle as a dominant, a lot of times there's also this thought that the dominant pays for everything and everybody. Dominant, daddy, mommy, whatever. And that's just not realistic. So a lot of times it is having a conversation about, you know, what are we going to do? I don't think it's fair that we might spend a lot of time and energy and resources in one relationship and not choose to do it in another relationship. But I do look at all those things as resources. Money is just it's another resource, just as time is as well.
I do have something to say. I'm not married anymore. My morality has to do with your life is yours. What you earn is yours. Your life is yours. I have no right to it. So in order to have any kind of relationship, the ethic that supports that is that I'm a trader, not a traitor, a trader. So that's where I go whenever there's an issue. So if I'm going to give you something, I'm going to get something back, and it's said and it's talked about. And the relationships that I have right now, that is a really powerful thing that is coming through right now with ex-husband, for example. The idea of, the old philosophy that they were in was this sacrificial philosophy that you do for others because you love them and you don't want, but people keep score. And I don't believe there's anything as a true gift. I think that there's always something in it for the giver. Even if it's just a feel good. Just be honest. I give you the gift because it makes me feel good. If you throw it in the trash, I still felt good that I gave you the gift. So the idea of trading in multiple relationships to me is the way to go. It's my opinion, of course. Crash your own sailboat. But so my primary partner, she was having child support negotiation, and she used that. She said, I asked him, what do I get? Changed the whole conversation. I raised my kids that way. When they said, Daddy, can I have an ice cream cone? I said, what do I get? And a lot of times they were like, I'll wash your car. But it trained them to think of me, to think of the person, rather than grow up with this expectation that just because they need it or they want it, that they have a right to it. And my kids are very, very, and they when I came out as poly, my kids were like, that makes sense. It goes right along with who Dad is. He's a trader. He trades with people. And he's trading his time. The most valuable thing to me is time. So if I spend time with anybody, it might as well be $1 billion that I'm spending with them. So that's the more valuable thing to me is my time. So I can give you my money and trade you for ice cream cones all day long, but my time is the thing that I really want to know. What am I getting out of it? So, and that's the honesty part.
I think that the core of working out the financial issue is, for a lot of poly men, is an issue of, I don't want my household resources going to support your relationship with some other guy. Let him handle that. And it's really it's a hierarchy thing. It's a paternalistic, chauvinist, a lot of things wrapped up in that. And I think that the really important thing is to remove the emotional charge from the issue. If you can get to the point where you don't look at your secondary relationship as being a special significant issue that has to be treated differently money-wise than everything else in the world is, then it's not so deep. If I can look at your trip with your boyfriend to Florida the same way I look at your trip as with your best friend to Florida, then it's like, do you have the money or not? It's not, well, I don't want you spending the money on that. So, just get over it, really.
I think the time thing actually makes a lot of sense when it comes down to what is valuable, because yes, we'll go out on dates. We have loves, boyfriends, girlfriends, and yes, we have to spend money within our household. They may have more expendable income, but being that I'm the female, I think a lot less about what I'm going to go out and spend. I don't normally go out and spend a lot unless I'm buying a gift, or I don't require going places that are expensive. That's not something that I need. Your time is really the main thing. It's the number one thing that I am requesting and asking. And for in the relationships that I've been in and I'm currently in, that is that's a big thing, and I learned, especially as a couple of the relationships went out the door, that was a big thing regarding, because I value my time, and I value the fact that, okay, time is money. So the time that I'm spending away from my family, away from my children, I've got to, if I'm going someplace, I've got to make sure that we have childcare. That's money, or, you know, or that is a trade or a barter with someone else. So therefore, it's still value that I'm putting into this. And then more times than not, I'm going to that person. They don't come to me because a lot of times they don't feel comfortable hanging out in the house with the kids and the husband. And so therefore, I'm getting in my car and I'm going to you. That is also time and money, and that is not thought of the same way as dollars. And on his end, he's doing all of those things as well as putting